Let's take a look at Chapter 18, dealing with the blood of the circulatory system. Do you ever wonder what makes up blood? Unless you need to have blood drawn, donated, or have to stop it from flowing in a particular injury, you probably don't think about it. But blood is the most common tested part of the body, and it is truly the river of life. Every cell in the body gets nutrients from blood. Understanding blood will help you explain blood test results and the amazing things about this incredible fluid and the cells in it. So here are a few outcomes that we want to be able to explain and describe at the end of the chapter. You need to be able to describe the functions and major components of the circulatory system, describe the components and the physical properties of blood, describe the composition of blood plasma, explain the significance of blood viscosity and osmolarity, and describe the general terms how blood is produced. And those are just a few that we're going to look at just for part one of chapter 18. So I have 3 videos pertaining to the circulatory system dealing with just the blood. So this is video 1 of 3. Now, the fundamental purpose of the circulatory system is to transport substances from place to place in the body. The circulatory system consists of the heart, blood vessels, and blood. The term cardiovascular system refers only to the heart and the blood vessels. The study of the blood specifically is called hematology. Now, the functions of the circulatory system are transport, protection, and regulation. When we look at transport includes following actions. It carries, the blood carries oxygen from the lungs to all the tissues and removes carbon dioxide, which is carried to the lungs to be removed from the body. The blood takes nutrients from the digestive tract and delivers them to all of the body tissues. When we talk about waste, it carries metabolic waste to the kidneys for removal. For hormones, it carries hormones from the endocrine cells to their target organs. And finally, the blood transports a variety of stem cells from bone marrow and other origins to the tissues where they lodge and mature. The third function is protection, and that involves that the blood starts to play roles in inflammation, a mechanism to limit the amount of infection. Then we have white blood cells that destroy microorganisms and cancer cells. When we talk about antibodies and blood proteins, they neutralize toxins and help destroy pathogens. And then we have platelets. They secrete these factors that initiate blood clotting and other processes for minimizing blood loss. Our third and final function is regulation. How does the blood even regulate? The circulatory system regulates. Well, we have blood capillaries that help stabilize fluid distribution by absorbing or releasing fluid. Blood proteins, they buffer acids and bases to help stabilize our pH. And then we have shifts in the blood and blood flow, which help to regulate blood temperature by rerouting blood to the skin for heat loss, or retaining it deep within the body in order to conserve heat. So blood contains several components and has certain general properties. Blood is characterized as a liquid connective tissue consisting of cells and an extracellular matrix. Adults generally have 4 to 6 liters of blood. Now the matrix is the blood plasma, and that's a clear, light yellow fluid making up a little more than half of the blood volume. Now, suspended in the plasma are formed elements. And these are cells and cell fragments, including the red blood cells, the white blood cells, and platelets. So let's take a look at our diagram here. At these various white blood cells, we have platelets, and we have the red blood cells. Now, the term formed elements, it alludes to the fact that these are membranes enclosed bodies with a definite structure visible with the microscope. They are not all cells. Platelets are mainly fragments. See here, let me get this going. Here we have our platelets. They're not cells, they're just little fragments that you find within the blood. Now, there are approximately 4 kinds of formed elements. We have erythrocytes, platelets, and then we have 5 kinds of leukocytes. And leukocytes are our white blood cells. Now, there are 3 kinds of granulites. When we look at the white blood cells, they're going to be broken down into 5 types. And those 5 types are divided into 2 categories. We have granulites, and you have granulocytes. Now, when we have the granulocytes, these are white blood cells that have granules, and they are the neutrophils, eosinophils, and the basophils. Then our second category of white blood cells are our granulocytes. Those are lymphocytes and our monocytes. Alright, so now the ratio of formed elements to plasma can be seen by taking a sample of blood in a tube and then spinning it for a few minutes in a centrifuge. Here's our French centrifuge right here. Now, erythrocytes are densest and settle to the bottom, right here, and typically consist of 37% to 52% of the total volume. And that's termed the hematocrit. Now, the white blood cells and the platelets, they make up a narrow cream or buff-colored zone called the buffy coat, and they make up 1% of the blood volume. Let's see if I can get this mouse working, which is right in here. And then at the top is where we have the plasma, and it accounts for approximately 47 to 63% of the blood volume. And it's a complex mixture of water, proteins, nutrients, electrolytes, hormones, and gases, and nutrigenous waste. Now let's take a closer look at plasma. Now, blood plasma, it's a complex mixture of water, proteins, nutrients, electrolytes, nutrigenous waste, like I said previously, hormones, and of course dissolved gases. Now, when blood clots and the solutes are removed, the remaining fluid is the serum. Now, protein is the most abundant solute by weight, totaling approximately 6 to 9 grams per deciliter. Now, proteins, they also play a variety of roles, including clotting, defense, and transport of certain solutes. Now, there are 3 major categories of plasma proteins. We have albumins, globulins, and the fibrinogens. Now, the albumins, those are the smallest and most abundant plasma protein, and it serves to transport solutes and to buffer the pH, and it contributes to viscosity and osmolarity. The third category is our globulins. Now those are divided into three subclasses. From smallest to largest, they are alpha, beta, and gamma globulins, which play roles to transport solute, for clotting, and for immunity. And you see they take up approximately 38%. Last is our fibrinogens. They are soluble precursors of the fibrin, which forms the framework of a blood clot. Now, some of other plasma membranes are enzymes that are involved in the process of clotting. And clotting process is called coagulation. Now, the liver produces as much as 4 grams of plasma protein per hour, contributing all major proteins except gamma globulins. Now, gamma globulins, they come from the plasma cell. And those plasma cells are connective tissues that are descended from the B lymphocytes. Nitrogenous waste are toxic and products of catabolism. The most abundant is urea, a product of amino acid catabolism. The kidneys normally excrete these wastes at a rate that balances their production. Nutrients from the digestive tract include glucose, amino acids, fats, cholesterol, phospholipids, proteins, and minerals. Let's take a look at this particular diagram, and we see the percentages of the white blood cells and the red blood cells that are involved in blood. We have our formed elements, we have our plasma, and we see how the percentage or the amount per cubic millimeters are within each content. We have our platelets, our leukocytes, and our erythrocytes. When broken down, we see the percentages as well. And then we have water within the plasma. We have 91% of it is water. And just a small 7% is of the 55% is proteins. And we have our broken down into our 3 categories. So you get a little better visual of exactly what the blood consists of, the components of blood. Let's move on. So I talked about the nutrients already, how it includes glucose, amino acids, fats, cholesterol, phospholipids, vitamins, as well as minerals. Now we have the dissolved gases, and those include oxygen, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen. That last normally has no physiological role. Now the electrolytes, those are important components of plasma, with sodium ions constituting about 99% of cations. So the sodium is critically important for osmolarity and can influence blood pressure. The body regulates electrolyte concentrations to keep them stable in the plasma. So look at viscosity. What's viscosity? We're talking about the thickness and the stickiness of the blood. But the definition that they give is the resistance of blood to flow resulting from the cohesion of its particles. Now it is related to the thickness or the stickiness of blood. When whole blood is 4.5 to 5.6 times as viscous as water, mainly because the red blood cells and plasma is 2 times as viscous, mainly due to protein. Now blood that is too viscous and not viscous enough can both put a strain on the heart. So those that are too thick, so it's going to flow a lot. It's going to flow a lot slower through the heart, and of course, getting to the remaining parts of the body is going to be a lot slower. But then we have those that are not as viscous, which are where the blood needs to be thickened just a little bit. Those are going through the body too fast, not able to pick up enough oxygen. Okay, transport enough oxygen. Now we have osmolarity. Osmolarity of the blood is the total molarity of dissolved particles that cannot pass through the blood wall. Substances must pass because the bloodstream and tissue fluid through the walls of the capillaries. This transfer depends on a balance between filtration outward and reabsorption of osmosis. The rate of reabsorption is governed by the relative osmolarity of the blood versus the tissue fluid. If osmolarity is too high, the bloodstream absorbs too much water and the blood pressure becomes elevated. So high osmolarity eventually leads to high blood pressure, and that's because of what? Too much water is being absorbed in the bloodstream. Now, if osmolarity is too low, water remains in the tissues and they become very swollen. So that's when people have made edema of the legs, and that's where you have blood pressure may drop to dangerous levels. So low osmolarity causes edema or swelling, and that's because water is remaining in the tissues. And don't forget, if osmolarity is too high, we have an elevated amount of blood pressure due to too much water being absorbed by the bloodstream. Now, the osmolarity of blood is a product mainly of its sodium ions, proteins, and erythrocytes. The contribution of protein to blood osmotic pressure is called colloid osmotic pressure, COP. And if it drops too low, as in starvation, blood and fluid is lost into the tissues. So here we have a couple of deficiencies of protein. We have hyperproteinemia, and that deals with the deficiency of blood plasma. And some causes of it would be extreme starvation. Eventually it will cause liver and kidney disease. Of course, severe burns will occur at that time. Then we have kwashiorkor. This is protein deficiency in children at a very severe state. They're fed cereal once they're weaned and start to get back in the process of getting to eat certain types of foods. They have thin legs and arms and a very swollen abdomen. So the protection of blood, specifically is formed elements, is called hemopoiesis. Now, an adult typically produces 400 billion platelets, 200 billion red blood cells, and 1 billion white blood cells every day. The tissues that produce blood cells are called homeopathic cells. Homeopathic tissues, sorry. The first homeopathic tissues of the human embryo form in the yolk sac, which is associated with all vertebrate embryos. Cell clusters called blood islands form here by the 3rd week of human development. These islands produce primitive stem cells that migrate into the embryo and colonize the bone marrow, the liver, the spleen, the thalamus, where they multiply and give rise to blood cells. The liver and the spleen stop producing red blood cells soon after birth. The spleen continues to produce lymphocytes for life. Now, from infancy onward, the red bone marrow produces all 7 kinds of formed elements, while lymphocytes are also produced in the lymphatic tissues and organs, which are the tonsils, lymph nodes, spleen, and thalamus, and the mucous membranes. Now, the blood formed in the bone marrow and lymphatic organs is called myeloid and lymphoid hematopoietes, respectively. Now, all formed elements arise from a common type of homeopathic stem cell, often called pluripoietin stem cells, the PPSP. The homeopathic stem cells have the potential to develop into multiple mature cell types. They multiply relatively slowly and are present only in small population in the bone marrow. Some go on to differentiate into a variety of more specialized cells called colony-forming units, CFU, each type of which can produce one or other class of elements. Now, myeloid hematopoiesis, like I said earlier, these are blood forming in the bone marrow, and our lymphoid hematopoiesis, this is blood forming in the lymphatic organs. Now, blood plasma also regulates continual replacement. It is composed mainly of water, which is obtained primarily by absorption from the digestive tract. The electrolytes and organ nutrients are also acquired from the digestive tract. Its gamma globulins come from connective tissue plasma cells and its other proteins from the liver. So this is the end of chapter 18, part 1 of 3.